Hello, how are you? My name is Alicia and I'm here to help you improve your Spanish skills. In this video, you're going to learn how to ask questions and how to answer them in Spanish. We'll begin with a brief introduction. You will learn in this guide for English speakers how to ask questions in Spanish. When meeting someone new, when asking for help and offering help, when shopping and ordering food, when finding out preferences and opinions, when making proposals and invitations, and you will also learn informal expressions to say I'm kidding and you're crazy. And I'm out of breath just by saying what you're going to learn in these next minutes. But don't worry, it's a lot of useful information, but it's quite easy. You learn that with few verbs you can say a lot in Spanish. So stay with me because it's going to be worth your time. You do not need to have knowledge of the language for this guide, but even if you do already speak some Spanish, the information can and will be helpful. Some expressions have the variation of tú and usted. In Spanish, if you are in an informal situation, you will address the other person by using tú. If the situation is formal, you will use usted instead. And this difference is indicated with the slash symbol. And the informal expressions are indicated with the asterisk. You also have a cheat sheet, exercises with answers, MP3, and other free materials to practice. You'll find what you see here on your screen for download available in the links here below in the video description. Alright, so after having said this, let's begin with a short introduction so you can understand better how our Spanish language works. And we're going to talk about the questions in Spanish. Las preguntas en español. We will begin with a statement such as John is the teacher. In Spanish, you say Juan es el profesor. This is an affirmation. You are just stating a fact. Juan es el profesor. And this is the way you will, say the words like this. Juan es el profesor. If you change your melody, you can turn this sentence into a question. And then you will have Juan es el profesor. So you see, we didn't do anything. The words are the same and the sequence is also the same. But my voice changed a little bit. Juan es el profesor. And when you write in Spanish, you have the question mark at the end of the sentence and also at the beginning, okay, upside down. This is the way that you must write in Spanish. But you see, the sequence is the same. So we are not very creative here, all right? And we are also not very creative when answering this question because you have Juan es el profesor. Is John the teacher? And the answer can be yes or no. Sí, no. You may also say, I don't know, no sé, but that's it. You cannot have a very creative response to this question, all right? This is the kind of question that you can also answer by saying yes or no, as you have in English the same kind of structure, all right? And, well, you have a different kind of question, which is an open question, because when you use quién, which in English is who, you have here who is the teacher, quién es el profesor, you have an open question, because it starts with an interrogative, quién, who. And when someone asks, quién es el profesor, you can be very creative when answering that. You cannot answer with yes or no. It doesn't make any sense. You can answer, for example, Juan es el profesor. Well, not very creative because you already know that, but that's a good answer to this question, okay? But you cannot say yes, no. It doesn't work like this. Exactly how it works in English. The same thing, all right? And now let's learn the interrogatives in Spanish, los interrogativos. And they are small words that are really useful in our communication. So you have the first one, which is qué. In English, what. Okay, we're going to see some examples, but just keep in mind, qué is what. In Spanish, you have who, which is quién. if you're asking about one person. But if you're asking about a group of persons, then you will use quiénes instead. So quiénes is the plural, all right? Who, both of them are who. Then you have cómo. Cómo is how, okay? And you can use it also when you do not understand what the person said and you want the person to repeat. So in English, you say, come again. In Spanish, you say, cómo, all right? How. And to ask about places, you have dónde. With dónde, you ask about location, okay? So it's a place that is really there, okay? Location. And you also have de dónde. De dónde, you're asking about the origin of something or someone. De dónde. And you also have a dónde when you're asking about the destination. So a dónde, you're moving somewhere and you're asking where to. A dónde in Spanish. All right? Well, and you also have in Spanish cuándo. When you ask about time, when, you use cuándo in Spanish. And if you ask about the price of something, you can do it very simply by just asking cuánto. Okay, you do not need to speak any more Spanish than that. You are at a store and you point at an object that you want to know the price of and you ask cuánto. And the person will understand what you mean. You're asking about the price. ¿Cuánto? It would be translated as how much, all right? And how much, let's see it in a little bit more of detail, because you have in Spanish as two categories in the grammar, masculino, femenino, all right? And you also have singular and plural. And in Spanish, you have cuánto, cuánta. And in plural, you have cuántos, cuántas. These four words in English, they are how much. But in Spanish, they are a little more specific. How? Well, let's take, for example, the word dinero. Dinero, money. Dinero, masculino, singular. So you ask, how much money? In Spanish, ¿cuánto dinero? Battery is femenino, singular. So you're going to ask, ¿cuánta batería? All right? Simple, right? ¿Cuánto, cuánta? And in plural, you're going to do the same because you're going to ask, how many boys? ¿Cuántos chicos? How many girls? ¿Cuántas chicas? You see, the endings here are referring to the noun, okay? And we're talking about quantities in Spanish. All right? You can also ask how long, okay? If you ask about the amount of time, then you ask in Spanish, ¿cuánto tiempo? Okay, the duration, the amount of time, ¿cuánto tiempo? And if you want to ask why in Spanish, you ask ¿por qué? ¿Por qué will be written this way, all right? And when you answer, you will say ¿por qué? Okay, and you will give a reason. You need to give a reason. You can ask why and answer because. In Spanish, it will be ¿por qué? Porque sí. But this is not a very polite way of answering a question, right? You ask ¿por qué? You answer ¿por qué? Why? Because. And you give a real reason, okay? And here, whatever reason you want to say, all right? A little bit more of grammar, but really just very quick and simple. In Spanish, you have cuál, which in English is which. And you also have cuáles, also which. So the difference in Spanish is singular or plural. Let's see the example. ¿Cuál fruta? You have two fruits here. You have to choose one of them. ¿Cuál fruta? ¿Cuál is referring to fruta, which is singular. And here you have two piles of books. And then you're asking what pile? Okay, so you're asking ¿cuáles libros? the first pile of books or the second pile of books. ¿Cuáles is referring to libros, which is plural. All right? In English, you do not make this distinction, but in Spanish, you do. All right? Well, so let's learn some more questions. ¿Qué es eso? Okay, if you are asking what is this, in Spanish, you ask ¿Qué es eso? Eso is the thing that you're pointing at. ¿Qué es eso? What is this? Or what is that? And you also have in Spanish the question ¿Qué hora es? What time is it? ¿Qué hora es? And even ¿Qué día es hoy? What day is today? ¿Qué día es hoy? And you can start a conversation with a complete stranger by asking ¿Qué hora es? All right, and the person normally will answer, and you may use this as an excuse to start talking about other matters with the person. Okay, ¿Qué hora es? Just to break the ice. The same thing with ¿Qué día es hoy? You just ask, the person will be polite and answer to you, and then you can, well, start a conversation. So here you see all the expressions that we have seen in these past minutes. And, well, if you want to pause the video to look at them with some more time, you can do that, or you can keep on watching the video because I have a lot of interesting things to show you. We're talking about breaking the ice. So here are the questions that you can use to meet new people in Spanish. Conocer a las personas. Well, you can say perdón to say pardon, okay? So if you are approaching someone and you want to be polite, saying excuse me, then you say in Spanish perdón. And this works if you want to, well, show that you're sorry because you made a mistake, but also to call someone. You can say just perdón if you want, okay? You can also use variations of perdón, which are perdona if you're talking to someone in an informal situation, so you're using tú to address this person, and you're going to say perdone if you are using usted to address this person in a formal situation. So they have the same meaning, but the grammar is a tad different, okay? And, well, when you want to know if you know already the person, you can ask this person, ¿Nos conocemos? Do we know each other? And I know it's very cliché to approach a stranger using this sad excuse, but you can do that because if Spanish isn't your native language, well, you do not have to try to be very original the whole time. You can use some clichés because, well, people will be, understanding of that, okay? If you do not speak perfect Spanish, well, use some clichés because it will help you break the ice and start a conversation with a complete stranger, okay? So you just ask the person, ¿Nos conocemos? You can use that to flirt with someone in Spanish if you want to, but it doesn't need to be flirty, okay? It can be just a way of breaking the ice in Spanish. ¿Nos conocemos? And you may also ask the person, if you're addressing him or her with tú, you ask, ¿Te conozco de algo? If you're using usted, the question will be, well, the same. Le conozco de algo, almost the same, okay? Instead of te, we were going to use le. Le conozco de algo. But this is a very informal question, so it's not common to use if you are addressing the person with usted, which is why it's only with tú here, okay? Te conozco de algo. And pay attention because I pronounce conozco with a lisp because I speak the Spanish that is spoken in Madrid and in Spain in general, okay? But you do not need to make this te conozco sound if you do not want to, because in Latin America people do not make this sound. In Latin America people would say te conozco de algo instead, and this is correct too, all right? Well, you may ask, ¿Cómo te llamas? This is, what is your name? If you are using tú to address the person. If you're using usted, the question, what is your name? Is ¿Cómo se llama usted? Okay. The difference between tú and usted, well, it's not so easy to explain because it can vary on many factors, the place that you're in, the situation. But let's say that generally in Spanish-speaking countries, you can use tú to talk to someone that you do not know or that you know just a little bit, and also with people that you do not well. Okay, so you can use tú with almost everyone, but be careful with that because there might be people who prefer, well, to be addressed with usted. For instance, older people. Okay, so you may want to keep this social distancing when addressing an older person, and then you should use usted. But there are older people who do not like to be called usted because they feel old when you use usted. So it's very complicated. If you do not know what to say, you just ask the person, tú o usted, to a person that you do not know. And then the person will say whatever the person prefers, tú, usted. Okay, and with this simple question, you're being very polite and the communication will, well, flow better. All right? So if you're using tú, the question is, ¿cómo te llamas? And if you're using usted, ¿cómo se llama usted? Okay? In Spanish, you do not have to say usted if you do not want to. You're not obliged to it. The sentence works the same as ¿cómo se llama? But out of respect, we tend to state usted in our phrase when addressing someone with this formal form of address, which is usted. So you do not need to say that, but if you want to sound more polite, you can. All right? Well, then the answer to what's your name is in Spanish, yo me llamo. My name is. It's not the literal translation, but it's the way we speak. So we say, yo me llamo. If you're a man or if you're a woman, it doesn't matter. Yo me llamo. And then you say your name. And you may also be polite and say, mucho gusto. Nice to meet you. Mucho gusto. And, well, you also may want to ask the person, what do you do for a living? So, if you're using tú, you will ask, ¿a qué te dedicas? And if you're using usted, you ask, ¿a qué se dedica usted? Okay, so it's the same question, but the situation is different. Here it's informal, ¿a qué te dedicas? And here it is formal, ¿a qué se dedica usted? This is a way of asking what do you do for a living in Spanish. There are many others, okay, but I want you to, well, know the basics. So here you find the most simple ones, okay? And the person will answer by saying yo soy and the work, the job, title, or the profession, okay? Yo soy profesora, okay? And it's the same. If you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter. The sentence will begin with yo soy. And then you say your job title. Yo soy profesora. And, well, you may also want to ask the person using tú, have you ever been to Spain? In Spanish, you ask, ¿has estado alguna vez en España? ¿Has estado alguna vez en España? And if you're using usted, the question will be very, very similar. ¿Ha estado alguna vez en España? You may add usted if you want. ¿Ha estado usted alguna vez en España? You can, but you do not have to if you don't want to. And the reaction will be, sí, estuve en Barcelona. Yes, I was in Barcelona, better said, okay? Or, no, aún no. No, not yet. And this is a great way of starting a conversation with someone. Ask about your place of origin. So you, if you are from England, you ask, ¿has estado alguna vez en Inglaterra? And this way you can start a conversation with someone that you do not know at all. Okay, it's polite, and traveling is always a great topic of conversation. Okay, well, then learning some new phrases, you're going to ask, ¿Eres de aquí? ¿Eres de aquí? You are asking, are you from here? And you are using tú. If you ask, are you from here, but in a formal situation, the question will be, ¿Es usted de aquí? ¿Es usted de aquí? And the reaction will be, sí, no, soy de, and then the person says the place of origin. No, soy de Inglaterra, for example, England. All right? And, well, if you are talking to a man, you are going to ask him, are you new here? And then in Spanish, it's going to be, ¿Eres nuevo aquí? To a woman, the question will be very similar, but the grammar is a little different. ¿Eres nueva aquí? You see, nuevo referring to a man, nueva referring to a woman. And this is also a very cliché way of talking to a stranger and trying to flirt with this person. You can use to flirt, not necessarily, but it's the cliché, all right? So you can use that as a foreigner. You're excused. You can use clichés all that you want, okay? People will be happy that you're speaking Spanish, okay? So don't worry about coming up with a very original pickup line. You don't have to do that, okay? Well, but if you are using usted, because you may ask that to someone without the intention of flirting with these people and you're keeping the social distancing by using usted, you're going to ask a man, ¿Es usted nuevo aquí? And a woman, ¿Es usted nueva aquí? The same question. Are you new here? And you also may want to ask, ¿Vienes mucho por aquí? Do you come here often? I know it's also not very original, but it works to start a conversation, okay? And you can flirt with that phrase. Or if you're using usted, you will say, ¿Viene usted mucho por aquí? And you may also ask, ¿Hablas inglés? Do you speak English? If you are being informal. If you're being formal, the question will be, ¿Habla usted inglés? Or just, ¿Habla inglés without usted? You can omit it, as I told you. And, well, do you speak English? Quite easily. And the person will answer, of course, yes or no. Okay, so this is that kind of question that you must answer with yes or no. ¿Hablas inglés? Sí, hablo. No, no hablo. Yes, I do speak. No, I don't speak. And if you want, you can also ask a foreigner, ¿Por qué estudias español? Okay, why do you study Spanish? Why do you learn Spanish? It's the same word in Spanish, estudiar, learn or study. And if you are using usted, ¿Por qué estudia usted español? And as you remember, ¿por qué? We are asking about the reason. And the answer will be, estudio español, porque, and you will give a reason why. For example, estudio español porque es interesante. I learn Spanish because it is interesting. Just like this, okay? This is a very good reason to learn Spanish. It's a very interesting language, so you can do that. And here you see all the phrases that we have just seen now. Let's talk about problems, or better said, ways to solve problems. So in Spanish, you may ask problemas, and this is enough as a question, okay? The meaning is any problem. You may want to ask someone, if you're using tú, ¿Cómo te encuentras? And this has the meaning of how are you feeling? If you're using usted, the question will be ¿Cómo se encuentra? ¿Cómo se encuentra? And this is a way of asking how are you doing without using ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué tal is very good. It's short, simple, but well, you may want to be a little more personal when asking someone, how are you feeling? Okay, so ¿qué tal works, but it's very neutral. If you want to get more personal with the person, then you ask, ¿Cómo te encuentras? Okay, and then the person will maybe, well, talk a little bit about the day he or she had, and so on. Okay, so this is a great way of starting a conversation. ¿Cómo te encuentras? And you may also ask, ¿Está todo en orden? Is everything all right? ¿Está todo en orden? And you can also ask, ¿Algo va mal? Is something wrong? ¿Algo va mal? You can ask, ¿Cuál es el problema? What is the problem? ¿Cuál es el problema? And you may ask, ¿Puedo hacer una pregunta? Can I ask a question? And a variation of that is, ¿Puedo preguntar algo? Can I ask something? And, well, if you are using tú, you ask for help by saying, ¿Me echas una mano? This is not informal, but it's a little more familiar, okay? Then you can say, can you lend me a hand, okay? Can you give me a helping hand? So in Spanish, you're going to say, ¿Me echas una mano? If you are using tú. If you're using usted, ¿Me puede echar una mano? This is polite but familiar, okay? ¿Me puede echar una mano? And, well, you may offer help by using tú and asking, ¿Necesitas ayuda? With usted, the same question will be, ¿Necesita ayuda? You see, very similar, all right? With tú, you have this letter S at the end, okay? With usted, you do not have S, but that's the only difference, okay? Well, you can offer help by saying, can I help? ¿Puedo ayudar? Puedo has the meaning of can I and even may I. So it can be used very politely. In this situation, it's both. So can I help? Is it possible? Am I able to help? Or you're just offering help. May I help? You're being selfless by offering, well, your help, okay? ¿Puedo ayudar? And here are the phrases. And now we're going to learn useful phrases so you can shop, buy anything in any store, and also you will order food at a cafe, a restaurant, whatever you are, by using simple phrases and answering questions that the salesperson or the waiter, waitress may ask you. So really, it's very important that you know these phrases because with that you can, well, you will not starve in Spanish-speaking countries and you even buy some bargains, okay? So we are going to see the question. ¿Quieres? And with quieres, the person is offering something. And we are using tú. So, for example, you can say, ¿Quieres un café? Do you want a coffee? If you're using usted, well, you may suppose how it works. You just get rid of this S here at the end. So you say, ¿Quieres? You say the name of the thing. ¿Quiere un café? And this is a very normal way of offering something, but it's not the most polite of them. It's not unpolite, but it's very direct. If you want to be a little more, well, friendly, you can ask, ¿Querías un café? Would you like a coffee? If you're using tú. If you're using usted, you will ask, ¿Quería un café? Instead. And this is very polite. You're offering anything, okay? And you may also ask, ¿Te gustaría un café? And this is even more polite, okay? more polite than that doesn't get. So you will ask someone that you're addressing using tú. ¿Te gustaría un café? Or even if you're using usted, ¿le gustaría un café? And as I told you, very polite and friendly. So you can use this with no fear, okay? Not that the other options, you may use them with fear. That's not what I mean, okay? They are all right, but this is the most polite of them. And to say yes, please, you say sí, por favor in Spanish. To, well, say no, thank you, you say no, gracias. And well, you pronounce gracias if you want, okay? Because, as I told you, this is the way we pronounce in Spain generally, gracias. But you also can say gracias, the way it's pronounced in Latin America. It's also correct. Then you're going to see sí, busco, and then you are, well, saying what you are looking for in the store. Yes, I am looking for example, a book. Sí, busco un libro. You can say, sí, necesito un libro. Yes, I need a book. And you're already, well, making conversation and getting something at a store. Okay, so you see, very simple but practical. And then you may also say no, gracias, if the salesperson is offering help and you are declining. You say no, gracias, no, thank you. Solo estoy mirando. And this is a way of saying another way is solo quería mirar. And the meaning of both sentences here is I am just browsing. So I don't have any commitment to buy anything in the store. Okay? So you say no, gracias. Solo estoy mirando. Solo quería mirar. And you also want to offer help by by asking ¿me puedes ayudar? And if you use tú, this is the phrase that is adequate. ¿Me puedes ayudar? If you use usted, you will say can you help me? ¿Me puede ayudar? You see, the only difference between them is this letter at the end. Puedes, tú, puede, usted. But the structure is the same. All right? And this is the way you ask for help. And, well, you also may ask very directly. ¿Tienes? Do you have? ¿Tienes libros? Do you have books? Okay? And if you're using usted, the question will be ¿Tiene libros? You see, the same thing happens here. You just got rid of this letter S at the end. Okay, so you're asking ¿Tiene? Just like this. This is very, very direct, but it works. Okay, if you think you're not being polite enough, if you're a little insecure, you just add por favor or gracias. These words, they are tiny, but they are magical, okay? They turn everything into a more polite version of what you said, okay? Well, so if you want to ask for permission, you ask in Spanish, ¿puedo? This is the same as I told you before. Can I? May I? So in Spanish, you ask for permission by saying, ¿puedo? And then you say what you want, okay? For instance, you want to pay the check at the cafe. So you say, ¿puedo pagar? Can I pay? And you did everything that you needed to do to ask for something. ¿Puedo pagar? Just like this. You do not need much more than this. If you want to add por favor, you can, but it's not necessary, okay? So in Spanish, we do not say thank you and please so often. So if in your culture it's very important to use these words, so I tell you not to be uncomfortable if you are in a Spanish speaking country and you see that people do not use so much this thank you and please. because that's a cultural thing, okay? We do not say it, but we mean it, okay? So you do not have to state thank you, please, because you're meaning it already with your tone of voice and other elements, okay? The way you, well, use your voice, the way you move your hands, your face expression, and so on, okay? So if you want to be polite, you can by using the polite expressions, okay? And we have plenty of them in Spanish, but you don't need to find it strange if native Spanish speakers do not say so often these polite expressions, because it's a cultural thing. It doesn't mean that we are not polite. It means that we are polite in a different way, okay? Well, so moving forward, we have ¿Me puedes dar? And then you say the name of the thing that you want. Can you give me? ¿Me puedes dar un café? Okay, and you're using tú. With usted, you are asking, ¿Me puede dar un café? Can you give me a coffee? And, well, also with tú, you'll ask for something. And you're going to say, ¿Te importaría? And then you say what you want from this person. If you're using tú, this is the phrase. Would you mind? And if you're using usted, the same, well, phrase will be a little different. You're going to ask, ¿Le importaría? Okay, would you mind? And then you say what you want. And these phrases, they are really polite and not so common because they are very long. Okay, so if you want to say them, you can, but they are not so common. Then you have sabes, and this is in Spanish, do you know? If you're using tú, but if you're using usted, you're going to ask, ¿Sabe usted? Instead. And you're asking if the person knows something, okay? And the reaction will be, sí, sé, yes, I know. No, no sé, no, I do not know. And, well, also important will be a variation of that. Will be, do you know? Conoces, if you're using tú. And if you're using usted, the question will be, ¿Conoce usted? And then you say whatever you want to find out, okay? So, saber y conocer, they are very similar verbs in Spanish, okay? Saber is more theoretical knowledge of something, and conocer is more what you know because you've seen it, you had some experience with this matter, okay? So, for instance, getting to know a person is conocer, okay? Because it's an experience, okay? It cannot be sabes, okay? You cannot ask, do you know Juan? You cannot ask, ¿sabes Juan? Because saber is what you know because you have learned it, because it's a more theoretical thing, like math or philosophy, okay? But if you are talking about an experience, a thing that you experience in daily life, then you're going to use conocer instead. So if I want to know if you have already met Juan, I'm going to ask, ¿Conoces a Juan? Okay, and you have a right before Juan because he's a person, so it's necessary in this phrase. ¿Conoces a Juan? Do you know Juan? Okay, well, just a tiny thing, okay? And the person will say, sí, conozco. No, no conozco. Yes, I do know. No, I do not know. And at the store, you may ask, ¿Cuánto cuesta? We have already seen cuánto, just like this. But if you want to be, well, a little more, well, use more words, but say the same thing, you will ask, ¿Cuánto cuesta? It's the same, okay? Asking about the price of something. And you also may hear algo más. Algo más is what the salesperson asks you if, well, to find out if you want something more, okay? Algo más, something else, anything else, something more. It's the same thing, okay? And it's possible to hear that at a store or in a restaurant, okay? So the waiter may ask, algo más? And you say, sí, no, okay? So this is that kind of question that you can only answer with sí, no, yes or no. And you also have the question, ¿Puedo pagar con tarjeta? And here you are asking if you can pay by card. Puedo, you see here, it's the possibility, okay? Is it possible that I pay using my card? And on the contrary, you may ask, ¿puedo pagar en efectivo? Efectivo is cash, and you may also say en metálico if you prefer. It's another way of phrasing it, cash. And well, if you're using tú and you want the person to charge you for whatever you bought or whatever you order at the restaurant, then you ask, ¿me cobras? Okay, can you charge me? Well, in English you wouldn't phrase it this way, but in Spanish it's very common. So if you're using tú, you ask, ¿me cobras? Okay, it's the same thing as, please, I want to pay. And if you're using usted at a restaurant, for example, you're going to say, ¿me cobra? Okay, ¿me cobra? At a restaurant or at a store, normally, at least in Spain, you're going to use tú to talk to the salesperson or the waiter. It's very normal in Spain. But if you're going to an upscale place, so a fancy restaurant or a boutique, you may expect that the policy of this company is to use usted to address the client, okay? In very, very elegant places, but normal places, you're going to use tú in Spain generally. So don't be afraid of tú because it's what people normally do in Spain. Well, here are the phrases that you learned. You see, with short phrases, you can ask for anything that you want, anything, okay? And now you're going to learn 4 phrases to ask questions to, find your way around city, okay? So, en la ciudad, in the city. You may want to ask, ¿hay un hotel por aquí? If you're asking about any kind of hotel, it doesn't matter, 1 star, 5 stars, you don't care. You ask about any place that you can sleep on. So you ask in Spanish, ¿hay un hotel por aquí? Hotel, un hotel because it's masculine. If you're using a noun that is feminine, then you're going to say una, okay? For example, you want a library, so you say, ¿hay una biblioteca por aquí? But let's stay with this example of the hotel. ¿Hay un hotel por aquí? I don't care, any hotel will do. If I want to be more specific, instead of asking, is there a hotel around here? Then I will ask, where is this hotel? And then I even want to say the name of the hotel that I am searching for. So I'm going to ask in Spanish, ¿dónde está el Hotel Central? Where is the Hotel Central? That's the name of the place. Okay, and this way you can ask about a very specific place that you know that exists. Okay, but you want to find out where it is. ¿Dónde está el Hotel Central? Okay, and if you are walking or if you are driving, you may want to ask how to get somewhere. And in Spanish, the simplest way to do that is asking, ¿Cómo voy a? And then you say the name of the place. Okay, ¿Cómo voy a la biblioteca? And there you go, you find your way to the library. ¿Cómo voy a la biblioteca? Or if you want to go to the hotel, ¿Cómo voy al Hotel Central? How do I get to the Hotel Central? And with that, you find your way. If you are using tú, you can, get in a cab and ask the driver, can you take me to? And then in Spanish, you're going to say, ¿Me puedes llevar a? And then you name the place. ¿Me puedes llevar al Hotel Central? If you're using tú. If you're using usted, ¿me puede llevar al Hotel Central? So almost the same. And it's more common to use tú when talking to a taxi driver, okay, in Spain at least. And you see, 4 phrases when you can say anything that you want to find your way around town. And you are going to see now how to, well, express your likes, dislikes, and also to give an opinion. So, if you ask, do you like, in Spanish, you're going to ask, ¿te gusta? And then you add a noun in singular. ¿Te gusta el libro? You're referring to one single book. ¿Te gusta el libro? And if you're referring to many books, then you're going to ask, ¿te gustan los libros? You see the difference? It's one letter, but it's a big difference. For the grammar, it's already a big difference, okay? And you are using tú for both phrases here. If you're using usted, you ask, ¿le gusta el libro? Do you like the book? ¿Le gustan los libros? Do you like the books? Okay, so the structure is the same, but instead of te, we have le when using usted as a form of address in Spanish. Then you have the answer. Will be positive. Sí, me gusta. Yes, I do like. No, no me gusta. No, I do not like. One book, okay? And if you're referring to a pile of books, then you say, yes, I do like the books. Sí, me gustan. And if you do not like them, no, no me gustan. No, I don't like them. Okay? And, well, you also may want to ask, what is the preference of the person? What do you like better? Or what do you like best? So you ask in Spanish, ¿qué te gusta más? And then you give two options, or you're showing two different objects. Okay, so ¿qué te gusta más? And then the person has the options to choose from. ¿Qué te gusta más? What do you like best? If you're using tú. If you're using usted, then ¿qué le gusta más? What do you like better? And, well, you react by saying me gusta más and one of the options. Me gusta más, and then you say what you like better. And, well, you also may want to ask, what do you prefer? And in Spanish, if you're using tú, you ask, ¿qué prefieres? ¿Qué prefieres? What do you prefer? If you're using usted, what do you prefer is, ¿qué prefiere usted? ¿Qué prefiere usted? You see? And you also have prefiero as your response. Prefiero. Okay? Then you say what you prefer. Prefiero. And that's everything. Okay? Well, moving forward, you have the way of asking someone's opinion on whatever subject. So you ask, ¿qué piensas? If you use tú, what do you think? ¿Qué piensa usted? If you use usted, what do you think? You will react by saying, I think that. Pienso que. For example, I think that Spanish is interesting, as we saw earlier. So you're going to say, pienso que el español es interesante. You see? And another way of asking someone's opinion in Spanish is to ask, ¿qué crees? What do you think? What do you believe? Okay, so what do you think? If you're using tú, ¿qué crees? If you're using usted, ¿qué cree usted? ¿Qué cree usted? What do you think? And you answer by saying, creo que, and you give your opinion. Creo que el español es interesante. I think that Spanish is interesting. Okay? Well, so there you go. All these phrases to talk about likes, dislikes, and also give your humble opinion if you want to. And now it's time to propose something and even invite someone to do something. So you may want to ask someone, ¿podemos hablar? Can we talk? ¿Podemos hablar? Also possible, if you're using tú, is to ask, ¿tienes tiempo para? And you name an activity or something that you want to do with this person. For instance, to have a coffee, you just say, ¿tienes tiempo para un café? You do not need to say to have a coffee, to drink a coffee. You just say, ¿tienes tiempo para un café? ¿Tienes tiempo para un café? Do you have time for a coffee? And here you're using tú. But if you want to change that to use usted, you just have to get rid of this final S here. ¿Tiene usted tiempo para un café? Do you have time for a coffee? And, well, still using tú, because that's the kind of thing that you're going to ask if you already know the person, okay? So you're already using tú. So you may want to ask, ¿quieres tomar algo? The meaning is, do you want to have a drink? Do you want to drink something? ¿Quieres tomar algo? And this is an invitation to have a beverage together. It can be used to flirt with the person, to ask very indirectly, well, do you want to have a more intimate conversation? Can I buy you a drink? It can be interpreted this way, but not necessarily, okay? ¿Quieres tomar algo? Do you want to have a drink? And you may also ask, ¿hacemos algo? And the meaning of that is, shall we do something together? ¿Hacemos algo? And, well, if you use tú, you ask the person, do you come with me? And you ask, ¿vienes conmigo? And if you're using usted, do you come with me? Will be, ¿viene conmigo? If you are using tú, you also may want to phrase it differently by saying, ¿me acompañas? Do you join me? And if you're using usted, almost the same thing. ¿Me acompañan? Do you join me? And using tú, you may also ask, ¿te apuntas? And this is familiar. It's not very, very informal, but it's a familiar way of asking, are you in? Do you want to do that with me? So you ask in Spanish, ¿te apuntas? ¿Te apuntas? And if you want to go out with someone, you ask, ¿quieres salir conmigo? And it literally means, do you want to go out with me? So to go out anywhere, in an open space, or to go, well, to a bar or whatever. But of course, it has the meaning, the same meaning that it has in English, to go out with someone on a date. So if you're asking a date, or someone to have a date with you, in Spanish, you're going to ask, ¿quieres salir conmigo? ¿Quieres salir conmigo? So, of course, if the situation is, well, the situation for it, it can be interpreted as you're asking someone to go on a romantic date with you. But if you ask it, well, very generally, ¿quieres salir conmigo? Okay, so we go out together as friends, nothing else. It can be also interpreted this way. Okay, so the context is very important here. You're not being necessarily flirty here, okay? It can be taken literally as, do you want to go out? So let's go someplace else, okay? And you may also want to offer the person to have a meal together. Then you ask, ¿puedo invitarte a comer? Okay? And the same thing happens. What you're asking here literally is, can I buy you lunch or dinner? But it can be interpreted as you're offering to go out with this person to a restaurant and have a romantic meal together. It can also be interpreted this way, but not necessarily. ¿Puedo invitarte a comer? Well, okay, so here you see many ways of offering something to someone. And now let's see some expressions that are very useful so you can understand better native Spanish speakers, because, well, we tend to joke around a lot, so it's important for you to understand when something is a joke and when it's not. So, de broma means kidding. So, you're going to say, estoy de broma. I am kidding. Or estoy de guasa. You see here the asterisk is indicating us that this expression is very informal, okay? You can use that, but it's very informal. Estoy de broma is general Spanish, but estoy de guasa is more informal. Or you also want to phrase it this way. Te estoy vacilando, okay? I'm just joking, not serious. Te estoy tomando el pelo. Another way of saying I'm not being serious. Estoy de cachondeo, okay? And you also may want to say estoy de coña. And both expressions, they are very common in Spain, okay? And beware, because the way they are written here is how you say I am just kidding. Estoy de cachondeo. Estoy de coña. But if you change a little bit these phrases, they have very different meanings, okay? Because cachondeo is like party or something like this. So I'm just goofing around, okay? Cachondeo. It has this meaning. But to say that a man is cachondo or a woman is cachonda, it can be interpreted as this person is funny, es un cachondo, he's a funny man. But if the person says está cachondo, you mean that this person is sexually aroused. So be careful with this word, okay? Está cachondo, to say that to a man, it means that he wants to have sex. So it's very important to, well, make a difference between the words here because they are very, very similar, okay? And pay attention also with estar de coña. In Spain, it's the same thing. You're goofing around. But if you take this word coña and you substitute O for this A at the end, so instead of A you use O, then you're using a word that cannot be said because it's very offensive, okay? So it's a word that's very rude, so you shouldn't say that in Spanish because people may be offended, okay? Well, it depends on a little bit on the person, but it's not a polite word. So instead of coña, if you use O at the end of this word, you're not saying a polite word in Spanish. So be careful. I have included them because they can be very misleading. So pay attention to them so you do not say the wrong thing. All right? Here you have all these expressions. And we are also going to learn estás loco. You are crazy. And of course, mental health is not a topic to be joking around, but the thing is that the phrases that you're going to see now are phrases that native Spanish speakers do use them very often. So you need to understand what they mean. You do not have to say them because, well, this may be a sensitive topic, but you have to understand when people say the things that you're going to see here, okay? So in Spanish, people say, esa idea es loca. So this is a crazy idea. Qué locura. This is crazy. And you may even want to say, me vuelves loco. If you are a man, me vuelves loca. If you are a woman. This means you drive me crazy. It can be interpreted as you drive me mad. Okay, me vuelves loca. Okay, so you're angry. But it also can be interpreted as you drive me crazy because I'm so in love with you that I'm, well, head over heels. It can be interpreted also this way. So it depends a little bit on the context. It can be positive, okay? So me vuelves loca. Oh, you drive me crazy with all your, well, the way you are, okay? So it can be positive and positive. And you also have, pero esto qué es? Pero esto qué es a very strong way of asking, what is this? So you're really, trying to understand what is happening here, okay? So it's a way of saying, what the hell in Spanish? Pero esto qué es? There are many other ways, but one of them is, what the hell? So, pero esto qué es? And you see, it's a little informal. And you also may want to say, you are crazy. Estás loco if you're talking to a man. Estás loca if you're talking to a woman. And you also have estás un poco pa' allá. Estás un poco pa' allá is a very informal way of saying, well, you're a little crazy, okay? It's informal and it's not impolite, okay? They are not rude. per se, okay? So it depends a little bit on the situation. And you may want to say, te has vuelto orate. This is not informal, but in Spain it's not so common. It's more common in Latin America. So you went crazy. Estás flipando. You say that in Spain. So you're crazy, okay? Estás flipando. You're hallucinating. You're not seeing things objectively, okay? And you may say you are crazy by saying eres un pirado, or in feminine, eres una pirada. Or estás tarado, estás tarada, also you are crazy. You may want to say estás zumbado, estás zumbada, also you're crazy. Estás chalado, estás chalada, also you're crazy. Estás tarumba, and here you have no variation. Masculine, feminine is the same. Estás tarumba, you're crazy. Estás tarambana, you're crazy. And se te ha ido la cabeza. It's like saying your head just trailed off, okay? It went away. Your head isn't in the place it should be. Se te ha ido la cabeza, okay? And you may also want to say, se te ha ido la olla. This is an olla, okay? So it's a very informal way of saying, well, you went crazy, okay? It's the way we say that in Spanish. Se te ha ido la olla. Another way of saying the same thing is, se te ha ido la perola. Okay, you stopped making sense altogether. And you have the tweezers in Spanish to say, well, you went crazy. The same thing. Se te ha ido la pinza. Okay, so you're crazy. And another way of saying you're crazy in Spanish is to say, te falta un tornillo. This is a tornillo. So there is one missing in your head. This is why something is wrong with you. Te falta un tornillo. This is informal, but very, very common, okay? So you do not need to say these expressions, but you should at least acknowledge that they exist and understand them if someone, well, is calling you crazy, right? And an animal that we find is very crazy is a goat, which is why if you think that someone is acting crazy, you say, estás como una cabra. You are like a goat. Or, estás como una chota. The same thing. You're crazy. And you may also want to say, estás como una regadera. Okay, this is a regadera, and it's another way of saying, well, you're crazy. And another word to say the same thing, you are crazy, is estás como un cencerro. Cencerro is a cowbell, so the person is crazy like a cowbell. That's the way someone somewhere thought it was a good idea to say someone is crazy by saying you are like a cowbell. So this is what you say in Spanish. And, well, another thing that looks crazy to us are maracas, okay, so this instrument. And if you want to say that someone is crazy, you say, estás como las maracas de Machín. Who is Machín? He was a singer, so he was always playing with the maracas. So maracas, they are a little quirky, so which is why someone is a little crazy, so you say, está como las maracas de Machín, okay? Well, and also you may want to say, estás medio loco en el coco, okay? And this is not an authentic Spanish phrase, but this was the way Cypress Hill, well, expressed it some years ago. So it's in the song, and you may want to say that because it sounds really funny and interesting. So you say, estás medio loco en el coco. Coco is the coconut, but it's also, well, the head, okay? So you're a little crazy in your head. Estás medio loco en el coco. Okay, it sounds good because it has a rhyme, and it's, well, not offensive because you're only half crazy. Okay, well, so these are the phrases that we saw here. So I hope you enjoyed learning all these informal expressions and all the other ones that, as I promised you, they are really useful. So at the end of the material that you can download, you find the activities to practice all this new information. And, well, if you like the video, just, well, like it. If you want to subscribe to the channel, do that so you can keep on learning Spanish very easily and communicatively. Okay, so thank you very much. Muchas gracias y chao.